everyone, and welcome to our Simpson Associates YouTube channel and our new series, The Big Analytics Query. My name's Tom, and during this time, me and my expert guests will be looking at a new data tool or transformation product and explaining it to you with a brief overview and understanding. So, if that's something that you'd be interested in, make sure you don't miss out. Like our videos and subscribe to our channel so you get all the updates. And here I am with my first expert guest, Andrew Hedge. Andrew, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So my role has been all around data for 25 years in the industry. I've done lots of different roles, from data engineering through to data architecture and delivering data strategies for organizations.
And today we'll be talking about Fabric. Now, Fabric's been around for about 6 months, open to everyone. That's it. Right, and yeah. There's lots of questions, lots of things unsure about. So why don't you give us a brief thing? What is Fabric and what does it actually do?
Okay. So in essence, it's a software as a service solution that really, similar to Power BI, brings that really great data analytics capability into the forefront for everybody to easily use and adopt. Well, the great thing about it is it enables you to have these kind of decentralized and centralized approach to your data and analytics. And that's really key, because an often a big challenge that we've had in the past is having to try and make that choice between whether we empower people to do their own analytics and visualizations and do all that great stuff around data science, around lake housing and warehousing, or we take more centralized control in the form of a kind of BI department, if you like, or a centralized team. Well, that really doesn't really enable people to foster sort of great insights and stuff, and it can disable the ability to be able to be more data driven. So what this does is it can has everything in one place, but at the same time empowers people by having a domain, what we call a domain-based approach to delivery. So within that one place, people can have their own ways of working, but still have one governance layer, one security, and one storage as well, which is a really key thing.
Well, you've convinced me. Fabric sounds a great idea of what to do, but what do I actually do? What's my first steps? How can I get started in this?
Okay, well, it's really simple in terms of actually starting off, getting into the tool itself. So it's part of the Office 365 suite. So though it uses Azure technology under the hood, it's part of that suite. So actually, you can start doing a trial today, on it and signing up for that. And then really, it's just a case of getting started with a particular use case, maybe doing a proof of concept, which we do a lot of with our customers to get them going and get them to understanding some of the real core kind of best practices around it. But really, I would suggest looking at one particular use case and starting off with that, maybe in an area actually that you've not necessarily dealt with before, maybe something like real-time analytics. So that's how you can get started. But actually, something really crucial I think everybody needs to think about when they're going into the Fabric world, and that is making sure that you put the right guardrails around it and the right management and that governance, as I was talking about, because we've learned from Power BI that is great to be able to put the power in people's hands, literally, in terms of being able to do visualizations, reporting, and generate insights. And it can get out of control. So what a lot of people are doing at the moment is having to take back some of that control centrally and do things in a real best practice approach and do things like center of excellences and stuff like that. So there's something to be learned from that when you go into the Fabric world and applying that same approach that you think, that's going to happen. People are starting to be using it for some wonderful, exciting things and generating those analytics, those insights and better outcomes. So maybe there is an opportunity at this stage when you're first starting out to think about what that could look like in terms of the way that you set up things like workspaces and stuff, how you maybe create centralized data sets, all that kind of stuff. It's worth bearing in mind when you're first starting out.
So you've spoken about the capabilities, you spoke about the governance, but from a more technical perspective, why Fabric? There's so many out there I could use. Synapse, Databricks, Snowflake. Why should I pick Fabric?
Well, actually, one key thing is that, as I've said before, it's software as a service, so it's more accessible in terms of getting going with it, and it's easy to manage as well. But actually, it's about what's right for you in your particular circumstance. And obviously, we can have conversations with, as we do with our customers, around what is the best solution. But the great thing is actually that a lot of these technologies are converging onto one methodology. So often I've had conversations with people about, oh, should it be this? Should it be that? This is the right thing to do. This is the right bit of technology to use and the right approach. Well, actually, it tends to be now only a kind of a more limited kind of set of scenarios or approaches that you can take. And they are all, again, converging on this one type of approach, which is around the Delta Lake methodology. And that methodology is fantastic because it removes some of the pain that we've had in the past as data engineers, which is moving data around multiple different times in our ETL and stuff to do different stages in a data platform. So, for example, we might have taken some data in, landed it, staged it, and transformed it into a presentation layer. And each time we're doing that, we're moving this data around into different pots, if you like. And what that does is it costs us a lot of money. It costs us time as well. And there's a greater risk of making mistakes in the process or the process failing and as such. So what the Delta Lake approach does is what we call schema on read, which means that you don't have to move data around so much, and it allows for a more fluid kind of development process as well.
What is that? What's serverless compute?
Well, rather than having a dedicated kind of server that's on all the time for doing the computation or processing of the data, or any of the processes indeed, it's actually it's spun up on the fly when you need it. So it's on demand, as we would call it. So there's not a requirement to set up in advance all the right resources for your needs, because sometimes you don't know what you're going to need it for. So you can do all these different types of processing of the data in different ways, from Power BI to things like Custo, through to data SQL and Spark, in different ways at different times and different amounts of compute, if you like, because it's just spun up on the fly. So there's a real advantage to being able to do that. So another way to get started and learn a bit more about the capabilities is to complete what we call the happy paths.
Ooh, it's quite jolly.
It is indeed. And they're essentially a set of how-to guides for each of the scenarios, like data warehousing, data lake housing, real-time analytics, and data science, that give you a flavour of how to approach each of those different scenarios and what the components are that are involved in it. So we've not actually really talked a lot about what those different components are. But that will give you an insight to what those.
Where can I find those?
Just on the Microsoft website. So we'll include the link in the channel description.
And are there any common misconceptions, things that trip you up about Fabric?
So yeah, one of the most common misconceptions that I've found when talking to people is around its capabilities on relational database approaches, and the reason for that misconception is we talk about what we call the one lake, which is that storage layer, which is a lake. We talk about the Parquet format as well. Again, a bit of a technical thing, but that's the way that the data's stored and the format the data's stored in within the one lake, and that's a standard approach. And that tends to be a standard approach within lake houses as well. And we talk about the fact that it's serverless compute, which is often thought about in terms of lake houses. Not really. There are relational databases that exist that work on serverless compute, but it's associated with more the lake house approach. So people think if they're building a data warehouse that's on a data lake, well, it's got to be a lake house, hasn't it? But in actual fact, it uses the relational engine. So the SQL, the database relational engine, or TSQL, actually in this case. So actually, it is still a relational database. It just happens to be that it's storing its data in Parquet rather than page files, which would be on an SQL server. So that's one common misconception that I've encountered quite a bit. People leap to this thought that it's a lake house, and they know no way of doing my standard kind of data warehousing kind of capabilities in a relational approach.
Now, you've mentioned best practice before. Do you have just one top tip that means that I can get started on the right foot?
Yeah, I think so. So it's all really, for me, it's all about identifying the different personas. So what I mean by that is kind of different scenarios within the business of how you're going to use it. Because Fabric can be configured in many ways in terms of, is it a lake house? Was it a data warehouse that you're going to be using in particular? Are you going to be doing shortcutting before you get into the rest of the detail? But there's lots of different choices. It's almost like a chocolate box of different options. So there's a temptation to maybe tend to try and use all of those different things in different ways for those different scenarios. So my tip really is to identify what your core principles are, I think, in terms of each scenario. So if I'm going to be doing, say, data engineering and data warehousing, what's my approach within Fabric for doing that? And set that out as a principle so that people can adopt it and do the work that they need to do, knowing that there are some set guardrails, really, I think, around what they're trying to achieve. And that often involves things like setting the workspaces in the appropriate way as well, to be able to manage and, again, govern that whole approach.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew, and thank you for joining us. If you've got any more questions about Fabric, write them in the comments below or send us an email and we'd love to get chatting to you. See you next time.